Another concept discussed in your book is anchoring. Explain that to us and how that affects us in the workplace, positively, negatively.
Okay, anchoring is one of a whole cluster of what behavioral scientists call heuristics. That's a fancy word for shortcuts. Your brain has all of these capacity constraints, so it's being really smart all the time in taking really short ways to solve any issue that's in front of you. So imagine that you are trying to pick a place for lunch. You could go through every restaurant review that's ever been written, but that's crazy. I mean, it would take you too long and you'd probably lose the will. So your brain takes shortcuts. It thinks, what did I do recently? What's that place that I went to recently? You might think of an Italian colleague that you spoke to this morning, and subconsciously or not, suddenly it turns out that Italian seems like a fantastic idea. So your brain is always looking for shortcuts and clues that save it time, save you having to go through all of the options, all of the possibilities. Anchoring simply means that when there's an initial idea that's on the table, it's quite likely that it acts as an anchor and it's very hard to drift very far from it. So I mentioned speaking to an Italian colleague, making it more likely that you decide magically that you want to have Italian for lunch. If I say to you, what's your social security number, which I would never do, clearly, whether it's high or low might affect then how much I ask you whether you're willing to pay for this bottle of wine. And that was a study that was done by Dan Ariely, which showed that the higher the last 4 digits of someone's social security number, after they'd been asked to state it, it drove higher bids for a bottle of wine that was being auctioned. We just grab onto whatever is the nearest information as a useful guide to making decisions. So how does this work then, this anchoring? It means you've just got to be aware that it's happening. Because if you're going to lunch, it's quite helpful having a shortcut. If you're deciding where to invest your company's big push for 2017, you don't want it to be down to random pieces of information that are just happen to be top of mind for you.
And how can that come into play and help people as far as raises, promotions, things of that nature, this anchoring concept?
Well, it's interesting because, so when you're making decisions, you don't want to be swayed by random information that happens to be nearby. Obviously, you want to adopt some kind of cross-check mechanism that means that you're always aware that it's worth getting a second point of view. It's always worth playing devil's advocate. There are a number of techniques that I describe in the book for when you're trying to make good decisions. But of course, turn this around. When you're trying to get other people to do things, it's useful to know that if you make a suggestion, it's quite likely it'll be accepted, or at least it'll affect whatever happens thereafter. So imagine you're trying to organise lunch with a colleague. You could say, do you fancy lunch? And then you have the kind of predictable 400 emails that go back and forth. But you could say, do you fancy lunch? How about next Thursday? There's a great new Italian place near my office. And it doesn't mean that that's what they'll do. They're not constrained to say yes. But the fact that you put an idea on the table means they're way more likely to go for something that's sooner and nearer. So you just have to be aware that you can be a bit of a force for good if you think that there's an easy answer, and to be a little bit more proactive in putting it out there.